Good afternoon, IFMA Denver. How's everybody doing? Wow, that is bright. Ooh. Can everybody back there hear me all right? Don't stand too close to that speaker. Okay, enough of that networking, talking nonsense. It's so good to see you guys. We had 102 people register for this luncheon today. That is the most we have had in almost 2 years. All right, we're getting back. It's good stuff. So I want to thank you for taking the time and being here to meet and greet and mingle and see your friends. I've just got a handful of announcements that I need to get through. And then I'm going to have a few different people come up and go over some upcoming events and activities that we need all of your help with. Okay. And then we've got a great speaker here to give us a little bit more perspective on what the city of Denver is doing and how we are evolving as an industry. Okay. So first things first, I wanted to just go over some of our upcoming events that I think are worth mentioning. Penny Johnson, and is Cody here today? Cody Goodson? No. Lowell's here. Okay. Our programs committee continues to put together really good events, whether it's these luncheons or our holiday parties or our ski trips or all these different things. Again, I like to reiterate this. Last year we did over 70 events. So as a member of this chapter, you've got a lot to do and a lot of opportunity to network with really good people of industry. So take full advantage. Anyway, this first one coming up on March 24th is the North Metro Facility Tour at Casey Middle School. Pretty sophisticated facility. For any of you that are facility geeks and really want to look at a state-of-the-art institution, this is worth going and walking through and learning. April 2022, the Spring Board Retreat. If you're interested, let Debbie know. She's taking registration. That's going to be down at 1999 Broadway. Eric Weisenstein was kind enough to host us at one of his buildings downtown. We'll get together, talk about strategy for this next year as it relates to our association. What are the things we can improve on? What are the things we did well? How do we be better as a chapter and as a collective whole and as an industry? The April tour is RK Mission Critical. I have to be honest, when I met Doug, I always thought that RK Mechanical was just mechanical. As I have spent a little bit of time with him, I have come to learn that they do a whole lot more, one of which is mission critical facilities that are portable. Incredibly sophisticated product that can literally be shipped anywhere in the world and has true control environment 24/7, 365 for whatever it is that it's housing. Okay, pretty cool facility. Again, well worth your time to go out and see what somebody else in the industry is doing that is unique and advanced, right? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out how do we do it better? How do we do it more efficiently? How do we do it more effectively? So again, if you've got time, that is April 6th at 4 o'clock at 20101 East 36th Drive in Aurora. Okay. And then the last event that I wanted to talk about, how many people in the room have been to Facility Fusion? Okay. This is a great event. This year it's in Austin, Texas. The date is April 26th. And 3-day conference. It's got a number of different functions, one of which is specifically driven at leadership. So our chapter generally sends a few candidates that we see as kind of rising stars in the association. I believe there's a scholarship that goes with it. But whether you're an FM or a vendor, I would highly recommend that you take a look at this event. It's always a ton of fun. There's a great educational component to it, trade show activities. It's worth the visit. Okay. All right. So that's it for upcoming events. And the next thing that I wanted to touch on real quick, and I always do, but I think it's important, is our sponsors. Without our sponsors, things like this lunch and our ski trip and our holiday events and all those things just simply don't happen. And to be blunt, it's all about the money, right? So for all of these gracious companies that have been kind enough to cut a check to us every year, I just wanted to take a minute and identify them. So Lori Libby with LMI Landscape is a platinum sponsor. Thank you, Lori Libby. Chris Harms, where did Chris go? I saw Chris earlier. There's Chris with Allied Universal. And did Greg Davenport make it in today? Rocky Mountain Construction? No. Greg, not here. Okay. Our gold partners, Sandra Langston and myself, are with Denver Commercial Property Services. Mark Pijanowski and Mike Pijanowski with All Phase Restoration. Lavina Friday. Is Lavina in here? Lavina's with Belfour Restoration. Max Siegel with Preferred Painting. Where's Max? I saw him earlier. There's Max. Our silver partners, Kim Lewis with Hot Shot. Thank you, Kim. Sam Harris, Encore Electric. There's Sam. How are you, Sam? Crystal Ackerman with Toll and Mechanical. Thank you. Donna Seward, HRS. There you are, Donna. How are you? Our bronze sponsor, Jen Escrow and Paula Menson with Palace Construction. Ladies, thank you very much. Really, really thank you guys a ton. Again, most of these events just simply wouldn't happen without your financial contributions. So thank you for that. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do, year in and year out, our membership committee puts in a bunch of effort to create a survey saying, hey, what are we doing good? What are we not doing good? What could we do better? The last time we did this, we had a 2% open rate because nobody wants to do an online survey. So I'm going to ask you to take a couple of minutes. There's a yellow sheet of paper in front of you. Will you please take just a couple of minutes, fire away on that thing for me, deliver them to Debbie on your way out the door so that we can get a little bit more of a baseline understanding of what you like, what you don't like, what you feel like we could be doing better. Without your feedback, we're just guessing. Okay, so please take a few minutes. I'm just going to shut up and let you focus here for a second, and then we'll move on. Debbie says there's pens on your tables. No excuses. I know, right? Does anybody need a pen? No. Has anybody tried the tiramisu yet? Oh. Sorry. Okay, as you are finishing those up, I did want to mention just a couple of things. As you're looking at that survey and talking about the different things that IFMA does for you, I want to remind you it's important what you do for IFMA as well. I had the pleasure of sitting through Crystal's membership orientation this morning, and it's just a good reminder. We have a number of committees that ultimately drive the activity of this association. It is a really, really good way to get to know your fellow IFMA members, get to know your clients, your other vendor partners, and help drive the bus. If you have any interest, and again, I want to kind of reiterate Crystal's point. We all know you all have a real job, and we don't expect a tremendous amount of time commitment. Generally, things are very well partitioned, but a number of the committees could definitely use more help. So take time to jump on the website, look at the different committees. On the website, you will see your committee chair. Reach out to them, ask them questions, see if it's something you want to do. I can tell you firsthand that when I first started with IFMA, Lori Libby voluntold me, Sandra Langston voluntold me. There are a whole bunch of people telling me what to do. And I can't thank them enough for that, because that was ultimately how I got to know most of the people in this room. It really is worth the time to invest back into the chapter. Okay. The next person I would like to bring up is Lisa Vanderhayden with Arapahoe County. She's going to come up and share a little bit with us about our education components, because I think sometimes it gets missed. So, Miss Lisa.
Thank you much, Lee. Thanks everybody for coming today. On your tables, you'll see flyers for all of the educational offerings that our chapter has put together this year. We are probably, I can't confirm this, but we are probably the only chapter that is doing every single educational offering that IFMA offers. So this year through our chapter, you can get Essentials of Facility Management live. You can get FMP live or virtual. You can get SFP virtual. You can get CFM live or virtual. And we're offering all of the 7 new competency courses that are hot off the press, not quite yet, but very soon. If you're thinking that you want a deeper dive on FM topics, those are a great opportunity, and those are all virtual. So go check us out on the education website on the chapter's webpage. The other thing that we're doing in education is we're supporting a really exciting grant. It's a Good Green Jobs grant, and it's through Goodwill and the city of Denver. And the courses have just started. We're teaching Essentials of Facility Management. We're going to have 3 cohorts of students, put 45 students through. We'll be teaching them Essentials and then the Sustainability course. And the top students will have an opportunity to get into full apprenticeships that we are going to be looking to our employers to place them in. So there'll be more information on that coming soon, but look for it. And we're breeding new FM talent for your organizations. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. To kind of piggyback on that, one of the things that I think truly makes IFMA unique is that education component. Vendors, as you're out talking to other FMs, engineers across the city, remember to mention that, because there's a lot of guys and gals across the city that are looking for that additional leg up. How do I get ahead? How do I learn more? And IFMA is hands down the most education-based association in the city, to my knowledge. If somebody can correct me on that, I'm open to that correction, but I think that is it. Okay. The next person I would like to bring up is Max Siegel with our Community Service Committee. He is a busybody and always has us hopping. And I just needed to get a little update from him and some of the things he's got going on.
Thanks, Mark. Sorry. Just to piggyback on Lisa's announcement real quick, along with those IFMA apprentices coming through, workforce development, both with IFMA and other associations, are out there at career fairs and everything along those lines. So if anyone is looking to hire, needs to hire, reach out to Debbie, let her know. There is a CU career fair this Wednesday, where hopefully we will have a stack of graduate and undergraduate real estate professionals looking for homes. So if anyone's looking for a new employee, reach out to myself, Debbie, Lisa, trying to influx the industry with some new people. As far as community service goes, a few weeks ago, Palace Construction was so generous to help us with the delivery of some patio furniture to some Marshall Fire victims. We were able to reach out, find someone that said that that was just kind of an area where insurance wasn't covering them. So we were able to help them out. Thank you very much for that, Palace Construction. We have also linked up with a family. Devin Eastridge, who is my co-chair, has been communicating with a family that had 6 homes lost in the Marshall Fire. They have been in that area since the 1800s, and everything has been completely wiped out. She has a list of wish items that they have that we're going to kind of look into and see if we can help them out. So please keep an eye open for that. There should be some more communication coming out shortly, but we've found some people that need some help and we're going to try to do so. So keep an eye open.
Thank you, Max and Devin and the Community Service Committee at large. Really doing some special things year in and year out. So I appreciate that. Just real quick, a show of hands. How many people in this room have openings in their office? Okay. Here's the deal. It doesn't matter if it's an entry-level position and up. Virtually everybody that I talk to says, I need help. I need bodies. So Max and Carolyn, along with the city of Denver and Dean, and there's a whole army of people that are collaborating to drive this. They're also working with BOMA and IRM and BOAC. Again, trying to work collectively to find a common path to bring that workforce back. Now, me and Pidge were just laughing about where are all these people, right? And that seems to be the question. How are they surviving and not working? But it's happening. So if we can all collectively come together and work towards that goal to find those bodies to come and backfill that demand, it would be huge. So again, if you have interest in helping in that effort, please see Carolyn McGarry or Max Siegel as they are kind of driving that for our IFMA chapter, and see what we can do to backfill some of these open positions. With that said, I will shut my trap and ask our second vice chair, Mr. Dean Stansberry, to come up and give us a little introduction to today's speaker.
Good afternoon. For those of you that don't know me, so Dean Stansberry, I'm a past president of the Denver chapter, and I'm currently second vice chair of IFMA's Global Board of Directors. So on my way to being chairman of the board, I will be chair in fiscal year 2023, which happens to be the same year that World Workplace is in Denver. How about that? Now, one of the things that I've been able to do as I've gone through different parts of the organization is I get to meet and collaborate with a lot of very incredible and very talented people. And we have one of them here today as our guest speaker. I've known Sharon Jaye and for a few years now. It goes back to when before we had an environmental stewardship community in IFMA, we had a sustainability committee. And that committee was doing a lot of things, and Sharon was a part of that. But just to give you a little bit of background. So Sharon got her bachelor's degree from Clayton State University in Business Administration. She went on to get a master's in project management from the University of Wisconsin, and then got a PhD in education from Argosy University. So a real slacker. But in our time together, when we were working on sustainability issues, her dissertation for her PhD was actually published in the International Facility Management Journal. She is the author of the IFMA's how-to guide on carbon footprint and co-author of the guide on how-to guide on waste management. So she has a great background, and she's worked in a lot of different places. She just came to Denver from the Washington, which was it? It's the Department of Energy and Environment in DC, and where she was doing a very similar thing. So Denver created this group called the Client Action, Sustainability and Resilience Department. Doesn't roll off the tongue. CASR. And within that, they have a group called Energize Denver. And many of you are probably familiar with the fact that we do have a benchmarking ordinance in Denver, which is mandatory and for all buildings 25,000 square feet and above. And what they're doing now is adding energy compliance to that. So Denver is one of the first probably 5 communities in the country to take that step. And so Sharon is now the policy director for Energize Denver. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Sharon. Big round of applause. Thank you.
It is old school, isn't it? I was unpacking. I just moved to Denver 10 days ago and I was unpacking. I went, oh my gosh, I have to bring my foam finger to this luncheon. So just a little bit of fun. I think that's about 10 years old. I just dated myself. So we are going to talk about the Energize Denver ordinance. And this is a very interesting setup. I'll just say it's super weird to not have a laptop in front of me and have my slides behind me and have to go from side to side. So I may turn around, show you my back every once in a while as I'm kind of looking at my slides. One of the other interesting things about this is it is brand new. My whole entire team is brand new. Some are new to Denver. Like I said, I just moved here 10 days ago. So you guys get to be a little bit of our guinea pigs. I love my IFMA guys so much, guys and girls, that I love it that you are our first really big presentation of a big group of people. So be kind. We're actually going to ask for some feedback at the end of how can we improve this presentation, because we're embarking on this outreach on this ordinance over the next 6 months and going to be talking to hundreds and thousands of people. So we'll talk about that feedback at the end. So we can go to the next slide. Our clicker's not working today, so we'll talk about that. I wanted to introduce my team. So we have, I'm the policy manager of the group. We're called the Energize Denver team, and we are responsible for implementing this ordinance for the city of Denver. We have with us today Daniel Rayner. He's our outreach administrator. And then we have another operations person who couldn't make it today. And then Berenice Garcia Tellez, who is our equity administrator. I'll talk about her role in just a little bit, but she's over on this side of the room. So if you all want to ask more questions, have a little bit of an individual conversation, we have Daniel and Berenice here to talk also. And then we are currently hiring for an administrator to work on the alternate compliance options. So if you know anybody that has a background in energy efficiency and wants to come work on my team, they have about a week to get their resume in on the city website. So please tell them to hurry up. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to give you a little background. I'm still getting used to the super dry air here, so I'm going to drink water a lot. So one of the interesting things about Denver is that 49% of our greenhouse gas emissions is due to commercial and multifamily buildings. So most of those, 82% of that number is 25,000 square feet and over. So if we are going to make any changes to our carbon footprint and reduce our energy use, we have to tackle commercial and multifamily buildings. So that's what this is all about. Next slide. So this is kind of our trajectory of what we're working on. We are trying to get down to a very low level by 2030 and then get even further by 2040 and 2050. If we stay kind of right where we are, we're kind of in the middle. We still need to reduce a very large amount. If we don't do anything, our use is actually going to go up. So we've got to take some action to be able to reduce energy use in buildings. Next slide. So this is kind of an example of some of the things that are going on in our office. So it's the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency, but you can just say CASR. That's what we call it. And it's much easier than saying the whole entire thing. And these are some of the things that we're working on in our particular division. Now, CASR is a brand new agency with the city of Denver. It has about 2 years ago had 11 people. We're at 32 people right now, and I think we're going to be hiring maybe another 8 positions in the next year. So there's a lot of work going on in the city of Denver around our climate action, making things more sustainable. So the one thing that we're going to be talking about right here is in the middle, this 30% energy reduction on commercial buildings and making sure that that is contributing to the overall picture of reducing transportation and commercial building use, energy use in the city. Next slide. So what we did was we took these goals of where do we need to be by 2030, where do we need to be in 40 and 50, and gave that information to a task force. And they worked through all of 2021 and put together a building ordinance that is trying to get at those goals. And the overarching thing that we're trying to do is do that 30% reduction from existing buildings. So they had 8 task force meetings, lots of working group meetings along the side, did a lot of community engagement over the last year or so. And what they did was they basically wrote the framework of this ordinance that was signed into law in November. Go to the next slide. So one of the really, really important things that we are trying to work on is improving racial equity in how we look at things. And so the task force actually went through racial equity training and applied this lens to everything that they did to make sure that we are implementing this ordinance right and not throwing up more barriers. What kind of support programs do we need to put together to make this easier for different groups or under-resourced buildings? And so we wanted to make sure that we were taking all of these different things into consideration when we were developing this ordinance. So we have this racial equity lens on literally everything we do right now to make sure that we're implementing this ordinance right. Go to the next slide. So on a little bit of a side note, the state is also developing their own building performance standards similar to our ordinance. And it's actually been voted into a House bill, but they have to develop the rules around it. So House Bill 21-1286 applies to buildings 50,000 square feet and larger. And what it does is at the state level, this is for all buildings in the state, if your building is 50,000 square feet and larger, you have to start benchmarking this year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then they put together a task force, and that we actually have somebody from our office on the state task force with a whole bunch of other cities and groups within the state who are working on what does that performance standard look like at a state level, and then actually writing those rules around it. So more coming on that. If you just wanted to Google this particular House bill or Colorado State Building Performance Standard, you'll be able to find more information and be able to keep up to date on the task force meetings that are happening. So this is our Energize Denver ordinance. It's broken into 3 sections, and I'm actually going to go through all 3 sections. So the first one is benchmarking. We've been doing that here for a while, so I'll talk about that in a second. This performance standard or policy, we're going to go into great detail. That's actually where most of my slides are going to be, is on the performance side of things. And then I'm going to give you an update on the electrification side of it. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. Next slide. So benchmarking. So we've been doing it here since 2016, all buildings over 25,000 square feet. The rules for 2022, it's due in June every single year. That doesn't change. And the rules around turning in your benchmarking data haven't changed. If you've never benchmarked before, that is a really important thing now, that you benchmark now that we have a performance standard. So if you haven't benchmarked before, come talk to us. We'll get you in touch with the right person and make sure you're doing that. Next slide. So the Colorado state requirements, I said they're brand new this year. It's due on December 1st. Every single year, it's an annual requirement. For Denver, it's 25,000 square feet and up. For the state, it's 50,000 square feet and up. But what we've done is worked all of the cities that are currently benchmarking, like Fort Collins and Boulder, maybe one more. We've been talking with the state to make sure that we align all of our requirements. They're not 100% aligned, maybe like 85% aligned, but it's pretty close. And so what we're doing is, if you currently benchmark with either Denver, Boulder, or Fort Collins, the benchmarking report that you turn into that city is going to get forwarded along to the state. And then all you have to do is go onto the state website and pay their $100 fee. That's it, you're done. You don't have to submit it to 2 different people. You just have to go pay that annual fee that is separate from our process. If you are in a city that does not benchmark, then you need to go to their website. They're going to be sending out letters soon to tell everybody exactly how to do that if you're not in one of these cities. But here's the website, and we'll share this PowerPoint with everybody later through the IFMA folks. So you get all the good links that are in this presentation. Next slide. So our performance requirements, we're trying to get that goal of a 30% improvement in energy performance across all of the covered buildings by 2030. Next slide. So we set targets, basically. What we said is we examined all of the benchmarking data across the whole building set in the city of Denver and said, okay, where do we have to get with these buildings to be able to hit that 30% target by 2030? Now, once we get past 2030, we've got to set some additional targets because we're not quite at where we need to be for 2040 or 2050. Well, we decided to take it in chunks. So we're focusing on 2030 first. So what we did is we said, we've decided to focus on site energy use intensity. When you look at the different cities, Denver is the 5th city to do this type of ordinance in the country. We have several cities that did greenhouse gas emissions. We have one city that did Energy Star scores, and then there's several cities that did site energy use intensity as their metrics. So they're all kind of a little different depending on what you're doing. But we thought site energy use intensity would be a little bit more easier to manage and to understand what we're doing. So what we did was we said, the task force said, with this data, how do we get to that 2030 target? And so they decided that to be able to hit that number that we need to get to at 2030, that we set it at the 85th percentile. So the top 15% of the buildings in the city are already at their target that's based on their property type, and the other 85% of the buildings do have to do some type of work. And it just depends on where your building is as to how aggressive your target's going to be. It's really aggressive. We understand that. And so we definitely are trying to put together support and programs to be able to help you do this work and get to that end target, because we really want people to get to the end target and not do the work. So that's what we're really trying to do. We'll go to the next slide. So if you are a manufacturing or an agricultural building, this does not mean warehouses or non-refrigerated warehouses or that kind of group. We still have to work out how those buildings are going to benchmark, and then how we are going to set their EUI targets. So we have the next 2 years, we're actually going to be hiring somebody on my team to be able to help do some stakeholder engagement on exactly how do we benchmark these buildings and then set the EUI target. So if you're one of these type of buildings, you don't have to worry about it, but you could be in one of our focus groups that's going to help develop this over the next year and a half. Next slide. So what we did is we set those end targets for 2030. Then we figured out what everybody was in 2019. That's our baseline. And then what we did was we set interim targets. With energy efficiency work, if you don't have those interim targets, it's kind of really difficult to do the work because it takes a while. You might have to replace equipment. You might have to improve operations. There's so many different things that go into the energy use of your building. We wanted people to have interim targets to be able to target it. Because if you decided to start work in 2029, you are most likely not going to hit your goal and then possibly have penalties. We want to make sure that people are on a really good trajectory. So what we did is took everybody's 2019 baseline and then set interim targets. And we have letters actually going out next week that tell you exactly what your 2019 baseline was, according to Energy Star Portfolio Manager, what your interim targets are for 2024 and 2027. And then everybody basically by your property type, like all offices have the same 2030 target and that kind of thing. But everybody's interim targets are different based on what type of building you have and what your 2019 data was. So mixed use buildings, if you have very high percentages of different types of property types in your building, then we took the percentages of those that were in Portfolio Manager and actually mixed your site EUI target. So you actually would have a customized target. And then we are going to have alternate compliance options that I'll talk about in more depth in just a little bit to be able to possibly adjust for certain circumstances in your building and work with you. Next slide. So one of the other parts of this is not that you just have to hit the target, but you actually have to maintain performance. We don't want people to actually hit that 2030 target of a 48 site EUI and then just suddenly go crazy the very next year and go back up to what we were before. So what we are actually regulating is the interim targets and then the maintenance. And it turns into a chart like this. So this was the example of Office A, where they started out at 100 in 2019. The first time we're doing a check-in is with 2024 data. We're going to look at it in 2025, and they need to have hit an 83. If they haven't hit an 83, then hopefully they've talked to us about an alternate compliance timeline or adjusted site UI. So that kind of thing, they've had a conversation with our building. Then they need to maintain at least an 83 for the next couple of years until the next target. Then the next target is in 2027, where they need to have hit a 66. They need to maintain that and then get down to that 2030 target. A building can decide to try and get to do a big renovation in their building a year from now and hit that 48 right now, and then that's perfectly fine. What we're going to regulate is this type of timeline, what that interim target is, and say that you're okay and good. So you can do this at whatever trajectory you want to based on what's going on in your building, but this is what we're actually regulating. Next slide. So this turns into basically 3-year compliance cycles. And this is kind of everything all together. Down at the bottom is benchmarking that's due every single year, no matter what. It's just, that's the way it is. So we wanted to make sure that, you understood that even though we're checking your site EUI every 3 years, you still have to benchmark annually. So what we're doing is sending out the notices that tell you what your interim and final targets are next week. Then 2024, that's the performance period for that particular interim target. We're going to look at it in 2025 when you turn in your benchmarking data, and then see whether or not you've hit that target, and then work with you to see what's going on if you haven't. Thing in 2027, and then same thing in 2030. Next slide. So this is an example of a case study. If this building had not done this yet, this is something they could have done maybe in 2022 to 2024 to actually meet their targets. This particular apartment building was doing some major efficiency upgrades. They had a EUI of 73, and with their building tune-up and some energy efficiency work, they got down to a 30. On a site EUI. So they're one of those 15% of the high performing buildings that are in the city, and they've already met their target. We're not going to say they have to stay at that 30, because you could see with between 2019 and 2020, they actually went up a point. That's not what we're concerned about. We're just concerned that they stay below that 44. And that's what we're regulating. So they can be anywhere under that 44 and we're good to go. Next slide. So data correction. We noticed as we were going through the building data and trying to set those baseline and interim targets for 2019 is that there are probably some errors. Folks really did a rush job in putting in their property use details or their energy data into Portfolio Manager just to get it turned in, and probably have some errors. And so we are going to give everybody the opportunity to correct those and make sure they get really good data in the system and that it accurately reflects their particular building. So what you should be doing when you leave here is go check your 2019 benchmarking data. Is your square footage in there right? Should you be a mixed use building instead of just an office building? Those types of things, and making sure your energy data is reported properly. We're going to be opening an application next week to be able that if you find some of your information is incorrect, we'll probably leave it open this whole entire year, that you can turn in an application saying, this is what I found, this is what I need to change. Then once we get that new data, we'll examine it and decide whether or not we need to adjust your interim targets and make sure it accurately reflects what's going on in your building. Next slide. Okay, so one of the other cool things, this is not just about energy efficiency. We want more solar built in Denver. It's one of the, Excel is doing some incredible work on decarbonizing our electrical grid, but we need to actually meet them at about 25%. They're doing about 75% of the work. We got to meet them the other 25%. And so we want more solar built in Denver. And so what we're going to do is, if you do add capacity to solar grid in Denver, then we are going to credit your EUI. So let's say you actually have a decent, let's say a 40% reduction you have to do in your EUI. You could do 20% of that just buying solar or installing solar, and then the other 20% could be energy efficiency in your work. So we're going to be fully crediting some of this. There's a couple of details. This is our basic rulemaking kind of language that's on the screen right now. So we still have to work out a few of the details over the next couple of months, but we will get back to you and send you that information. So next slide. So we'll have some alternate compliance options, and I'm going to talk about each one. But one of the interesting things about today is that we have a rulemaking that does very legalized, crazy language that's sometimes hard to interpret, that is flexible enough so that we have the discretion of implementation in our office. And that's kind of where we are at this moment. We have this rulemaking language that actually tells us the types of options we are going to offer, but we don't have some of the details worked out. And we're going to be doing that over the next 2 to 3 months. So for example, we have some language under the timeline option that says a clear plan articulating which improvements will be made in the building, when such improvements will be made, and how those improvements will result in the building reaching its final EUI target. And that's what you have to turn in to ask for a timeline adjustment. Well, what does a clear plan mean? What are the minimum requirements of a clear plan? What if we require an energy audit? What are the minimum requirements of an energy audit? Because if some of you have seen different energy audits, they're all kind of different. Even if they're all ASHRAE level 2, they're all slightly different. So we are working on these very specific details if you need an adjustment, and we will be publicizing it. We're going to be having some focus groups to talk about exactly what those minimum requirements are, and then get back with everybody. Next slide. So the target adjustment, this is to adjust the final 2030 EUI target. So let's say you have a particular circumstance where you run a 24-hour call center in your building, and what we're setting the office target on is kind of a normal 12 to 16-hour day instead of a 24-hour day. You know, some of those really special circumstances, let's say 30% of your building's a data center. Well, that's an issue. But if you didn't benchmark your building that way, that 30% is a data center, then we need to do a data correction, and we probably need to mix your EUI target and make sure that 2030 target reflects actually what's going on in your building. So this is the option to not just data correct, that option is open for everybody, but to actually inform us of inherent characteristics of the way your building operates, or the way it's built, or what kind of equipment. There's kind of a lot of different scenarios that we're looking at to be able to adjust that final 2030 target. Next slide. So then we're also going to offer a timeline adjustment, and this could either change the interim targets in 2024, 2027, or possibly adjust the 2030 timeline of the final target at the end. And so if we're taking into consider some life cycle of your major equipment, like you want to replace your boiler, or you want to replace your rooftop units, but the life cycle of that equipment is 7 to 8 years from now, and you really want to do that renovation in 2030 instead of right now, we can do a timeline adjustment. We can say, okay, what can you do in the meanwhile? Let's do some of that low cost, no cost stuff. Maybe some of, train your facility managers and your operations people. What can you do in the meanwhile? And then we'll adjust that last target to account for the life cycle of things that are going on in your building. So we still have to work out some of the fine details of this, but this is something that we definitely want to be able to work with everybody on. Next slide. So we are going to be offering a prescriptive option for the interim targets for smaller buildings. So the group that we've picked at this moment is between 25,000 and 100,000 square feet, but we are open to changes. If you think that this would make a big deal in your interim targets, then we might adjust that 100,000 square feet to 150,000 square feet. Those are some of the things that we're going to be asking in our focus groups over the next couple of months. So what this affects is your interim targets. So if you're a smaller building in this group of buildings, if you want to be able to just do a couple of little things for your interim targets, maybe focus on that 2030 target a little bit later, if you've installed electrified at least 70% of your space and water heating equipment, and done LED lights, and maybe you've already done that and you just want to turn in paperwork, then your interim targets are taken care of. You still have to hit the 2030 target at the end, but at least the interim targets are done. So you can do this as a prescriptive option. Next slide. So then we have a performance policy for smaller buildings. And these are buildings that we are not benchmarking, so we cannot do EUI targets for. So buildings between 5,000 square feet and 25,000 square feet just have to do something prescriptive in their building. They either have to do a lighting upgrade where they're installing all LEDs, or purchasing or installing solar that's equivalent to 20% of their usage. And their timeline is based on the size of their building. All they do is turn in the paperwork to say that they've done one of these options by that deadline, and they're done. They're good to go. Next slide. So one of the other things to kind of wrap up the conversation on the performance policy is that if the building is sold, you have to tell the new building owner, and while it's on the market and for prospective buyers, and when you turn over the paperwork to the new group, that this is where you are with the performance policy. You've done this, this, and this. This is what your site EUI target when you turn it over to them, and the information about the 2030 target. So that's now in law that has to happen as part of the sale process. Next slide. So penalties. I don't have a lot of information on this particular slide right now because we have a particular number that's in the ordinance, but we don't think we're actually going to implement that number. So I'm not actually going to say it out loud. We're going to we're working with an engineering group to look at different penalty scenarios over the next couple of months, do a little bit more stakeholder engagement on it. But it's based on how much KBTU over the target you are on those particular times. I would say that we're probably not going to do penalties at all for 2024 because we think that's too soon. I mean, it's really not that far away, but definitely 2030 is up for discussion, but we're still working out the details. So I can certainly answer questions about this if you want to, but we're not talking about it that much right now. I loved the rumble in the room when I said that particular statement. I get it. I do get it. The initial calculations, so somebody asked how many zeros. We want the penalty to be more than the cost of compliance, because what we really want people to do is invest the money in their buildings. We do not want to take penalties, because even if we do take the penalties, we're going to reinvest it into energy efficiency programs anyways. So all you're doing is, if you don't do the work and paying a penalty, is you are funding our energy efficiency programs, and we're going to spend the money probably in somebody else's building. So you should spend the money in your building. That's what we want you to do. Okay, so then we're going to go into support and incentives. How am I doing on time? Anybody know it? Cool. Okay, so we're in the process of developing support and resources. We are launching a new website in about a week or two to actually have more access to the incentive programs, all the different information that you can find to be able to do this work. We're working on how-to guides and checklists to make sure that you have some guidance. We're doing some of this targeted outreach like we're doing today. In education, we're going to be building out a few more education programs, and then building out a little bit more advanced, or at least basic technical assistance. Next slide. So these are just a couple of links to some of the current incentives and funding opportunities that are out there right now. There's actually some new things in development, so this is not just it. I will say, when I went on to Xcel Energy's website, they had like 10 different programs of different kinds that you could look at that would help you exactly with this particular work. One of the things that I was particularly interested in was their strategic energy management cohort group that you go into for a year, and they do coaching and teach you how to build out a strategic energy management plan, which I thought that was super awesome, and that they pay for and do all of the training. We do have a STEAM program. So if you are one of the buildings that is in Denver on the STEAM loop of how to address that particular issue, the idea of getting off of STEAM in Denver is more of like a decade-long program. So if you are one of those STEAM buildings, you could always talk to our office, and we have some bigger plans for that particular program. And then we have CPACE and Colorado Clean Energy Fund. There's a program that you can get access to called the National Energy Improvement Fund through Excel. So there are some funding opportunities out there if you need that type of assistance. Next slide. So I wanted to acknowledge, I put this slide up just for you guys because I wanted to do a shout out to the IFMA Foundation and the Denver chapter, because I know you guys are doing awesome stuff. So we just funded, the CASR office just funded several different green workforce programs, including the one that Lisa talked about earlier with the FM apprenticeship programs. And we are super excited about that and so happy that the IFMA Denver chapter is involved in that. Okay. So under resource buildings, we are actually, and Berenice Garcia Tellez, who's in the room today, is actually leading this particular effort. We are trying to put together some programs and support and resources very specifically for under-resourced buildings so that they're not just kind of left out in the cold and really struggle to actually meet this ordinance. So we are doing some work on how to identify what kind of building actually qualifies or is called an under-resourced building. So we're looking at some of our nest neighborhoods here in Denver, looking at affordable housing or buildings that serve our frontline communities, buildings with human service providers, and buildings of significance to the community. So we are developing the social equity index of how to take our benchmarking information and put it together with all the super cool data and actually help us identify these groups because we want to give them extra support and resources. Next slide. So we could go ahead and just click until they all show up. There you go. So bringing our benefits to our frontline communities, we want to make sure we're improving health through indoor and outdoor air quality. We're improving safety with reduced exposure to carbon monoxide leaks, improving building quality and access to cooling, reducing energy costs, providing economic opportunities, enabling our communities to thrive, and then advancing our equity goals within the city. So these are very important goals for our office that we're trying to make sure we implement these policies very equitably. Next slide. So what we're doing is designing this support with community input. And that's actually what Berenice is working on, is going into the communities, looking at what their needs are, having them help us identify some of these buildings, and then figure out exactly what they need help with. We could sit up here at our little high level up at the City of Denver office and imagine all kinds of support and resources, but that may not be exactly what they need. So we're doing a lot of community outreach over the next couple of months, and then actually designing the support program with their input. So we're really excited about that particular process that's going to happen over the next 6 months. Next. So these are some ideas that we've been floating around of what type of support resources are going to go to the under-resourced buildings, doing that targeted intensive outreach, doing a virtual portal where they can actually get more help or see their building information a little bit more easily. Maybe they don't have access to all these energy management systems that maybe some of us have. And then actually getting them connected with engineers that can help them with energy audits that are possibly subsidized by the city. So we're looking into all kinds of different things for under-resourced buildings. So then I actually only have one slide about this particular part of the ordinance because it is not being implemented by our office. It's actually being implemented by community planning and development that do your building permits when you're doing renovations or new buildings. And it's done through amendments to the fire code, the building and construction and fire code. So there's a lot of information on this slide and it's all tied together. So the electrification policy that is in the Energize Denver ordinance is about new buildings or buildings going through major renovations that then kick in code updates. So that's where we're talking about here. It's not necessarily about your existing building unless you are planning a big renovation project, then this may end up applying to you. So what it says is that all commercial and multifamily buildings will need to do partial electrification of space and water heats upon system replacement. So we're not saying that in 2025, you have to go replace all of your equipment. That's not what this says. This says if you're planning a replacement and you've reached the end of life of your current system, then we want you to electrify those things. And when it's cost effective, there's actually several paragraphs worth of what cost effective means. But this is what's happening is that in 2023, when you are going to reinstall or do new equipment or build a new building, you have to do an electrification feasibility report. You have to right size your equipment because you may have something in your building right now that's completely oversized because it's really old. And or pressure test natural gas piping. So on the right hand side, what's required when you put in that information to CPD to be able to do your project is you have to do 2 out of those 3. And then what we're going to focus on is adjusting the building code to do some amendments to easy to electrify systems, ones that have actual electrification options out there now, and then the harder to electrify equipment over the next between now and 2027 is where we're going to be amending the code. And we are also going to be working on incentives to help pay for electrification feasibility reports and some of this work that has to be done to actually then satisfy these particular requirements. So next steps. So this is where we are. Just wanted to kind of tell you where our office is because it's all brand new and we still have a lot of work to do. I say Berenice started in January. I started in January. Daniel started in November. My whole entire team is new. So we still have a lot of work to do. So what we're doing on March 15th, next week, is sending out compliance notices that actually tells you that your benchmarking's due on June 1st. Here's what your interim targets is, and this is what your 2030 target is. We've already started our outreach. We're about to launch our new website that has more information on it. And then Berenice is working on the equitable support and incentive design process. That's going to be going on for the next 6 months. So if any of you actually think you are an under-resourced building or have contacts with people that you think would qualify for under-resourced building help, please reach out to us, write it down. We're going to actually ask for some feedback in a second to help us identify those people and put us in contact with them. Oh, 2 more lines. Then we're going to be doing some community engagement around the alternate compliance options that I mentioned before to make sure we get those details right of exactly what you need to turn in, and then turn into the office. And then hopefully by September, we will actually have those technical support programs for under-resourced buildings launched. So we have a really busy next 6 months. Now we go to the next slide. So my ask for you today as you leave is to check out our website. If you want to look at it this week and then look at it again next week when we launch the new site, it's okay. But it's called the Energize Denver Hub. We have lots of resources and webinars and all kinds of information for you to learn more about this ordinance. On that web page, we actually have an existing buildings and homes newsletter where we will give everybody updates on this ordinance and all kinds of other information and new programs that we're doing in the office. Please look at your portfolio manager data. If you think it's in a really good place, you could skip this step. But as we were looking and setting targets for everybody, we realized that we had a decent amount that we thought just really weren't quite right and needed a little bit of adjustment to do those data corrections. Be on the lookout for your compliance letters. We're going to be mailing them next week, and then we're going to follow up with an email the week after to the contacts that we have for the benchmarking. So if you don't personally get the email, that's maybe why. Check with the benchmarking person that does your submission and check for that email if you don't see it. And then check out Excel's energy programs. I was really surprised at the depth of different kinds of programs that they do have. So if you've never done anything with Excel, please go check them out because they have a lot of different options. So I have a couple questions for you before we get into the questions for me. And we have some little Post-it notes on the table. So if you think about something or you want to give some feedback, just write it on a Post-it, stick it on the table, and I'm going to grab them on our way out this afternoon. But we'll get in and then we'll do some Q&A. So like I said earlier, this is our first big presentation to a group. So thank you, IFMA friends, for being my guinea pig today. I really do appreciate that. And I would really love your feedback. If anything in this presentation is unclear, I definitely want to improve it and make sure that you all are getting the information that you need. Like, what do you want to know more about this ordinance? If you were getting this presentation for the first time, what's your burning question? And then maybe I could just include it in my presentation. What kind of services or incentives do you want to see that maybe aren't out in the market right now? What can our office do to help support your efforts over the next 8 years? We would love to get some feedback on that. And then do you have a building that would serve as a really great case study? Maybe you have done some previous energy efficiency work, or you're about to, and we can actually follow your journey. We definitely need more case studies because what people usually like to hear are other buildings that have done the same thing or already, and they want to be able to follow them and talk to that facility manager about what they're doing. We are also recruiting electrification buildings. So if you are poised to be able to do some electrification work in your building, we are actually recruiting for some pilot buildings, and that would include some level of funding to help with the electrification as being part of the pilot. So please write something on a Post-it note, leave it on the table. I'll grab them on the way out. Thank you very much. So this is my contact information. I'm overseeing the team. Daniel, if you want to be able to put together maybe a group of people with like a room with 10 people, or get together with a couple other buildings and actually have us do this presentation for a smaller group of people, I'm asking for at least 10 or more because we're going to be doing a lot of these presentations, and I want to make sure we can put together groups of people. You can reach out to Daniel. If you have contacts for under-resourced buildings, or if you're interested in maybe participating in some of the conversations, this is Berenice's email. And then if you just want general support, our hub is staffed by a help center, so you can call in. You can either email our Energize Denver email or call in and actually talk to somebody, and they can just answer whatever questions you need. So thank you very much, and I will open the floor for questions. Yes, so he asked if we could get a copy of the presentation. I will work with Penny to make sure that she gets the presentation, and then she can distribute accordingly. Yes, the question was, can she post it on the website? And yes, because we're about to post it on our website too when we launch the new website next week. So it will be available for download. So I'll work with Penny on that. Hey, Byron. Right. I got you. So Byron asked about renewable energy credits and whether or not that would suffice for solar. And unfortunately, I'm going to say no at this moment. That doesn't mean it might change in the future. What we're trying to do is build capacity. What there is a thing though is in Excel has a new subscription program that we are learning about right now that you could subscribe into that, and that helps fund building new solar in Denver. That's the initial. That doesn't mean that renewable energy credits won't get factored in maybe down the road, but right now we're really trying to build the solar capacity that's local, not wind energy in Texas or, solar panels in Pennsylvania. We really want it to be local, but that doesn't mean that that might not change in the future. We do have to work out some of the solar. We do have to work out some of the solar rules and the details around that. No, we're in conversations with Excel. There's some expansions of some programs going on right now that I don't know all the details to tell you, but I know there's conversations happening. So I know there's a limitation about what is available in Denver, and we actually want to change that. So we're working with the powers that be to try and change that on the solar side. He was asking about getting, working with the price of electricity versus the price of gas. I know there are some folks in my office. I unfortunately can't answer that question, but I know there are several people in my office that are working and talking about that. Unfortunately, some of those prices are driven by market, which we don't have any control over, but there are conversations happening behind the scenes. I just don't know enough to answer that question. So, Mark, did you?
I've got a couple of questions. So a few years back, we saw all of our warehouse space in the city was largely consumed by the marijuana. I'm curious, why are they exempt from this regulation?
So they're not exempt. They're going to be on a slightly different timeline. So they would be considered part of the agriculture and manufacturing. And one of the problems is that Energy Star Portfolio Manager does not have a function or a property type inside their system to be able to benchmark them properly, for then to us to be able to take that data and then turn it into EUI targets, which is why we have to do the work over the next year or two, is to figure out how are they going to benchmark, because Portfolio Manager doesn't give them a way to benchmark. And so, and then once we get them benchmarking, then we're going to set targets for them. So they're just going to be on a different timeline.
And then can you speak to kind of what's the messaging going back to investors and owners to keep them here? We have a shortage of housing right now. If I'm looking at Salt Lake or Boise or Phoenix, all three markets are much more interesting to me from an investment standpoint because I don't have these things answered.
Right.
What's that message?
So talking about messaging to investors and developers and that kind of thing for them to stay in Denver, this is actually going to improve our building stock. There's a beautiful slide that I probably should have added to this to be able to talk about that. I just didn't. So Daniel's making a note for us to be able to add that to the next presentation. We do have some information on our website that talks about the improvements to the buildings. But one of the things that I've experienced over the last couple of years is that most of the large cities in the country are actually looking at doing the exact same thing. So while we're the 5th city to do that, I worked in Washington, D.C. for the last 2 years implementing their policy, and it was the first in the country. So it was a very painful process, and I learned a lot from it. And Denver got to learn a lot from DC and some of the other cities that are doing it. But I know of at least 15 to 20 more cities where we're all talking to each other and implementing these type of programs. So we're going to get to a point probably over the next 5 to 10 years where everybody's going to be doing these types of policies, especially if they're benchmarking now. It's easier for them to implement it. Some of the cities looking at this type of policy aren't benchmarking. So they've got to benchmark for a couple of years before they can put a performance policy in place. And so it is coming. So to answer the question, I'd point you to my website where we're going to put some really good justifications or some ideas of things to talk to CEOs and investors and that kind of thing of how this is going to improve things in our building stock in Denver. More questions? Carolyn.
All right, so this is for the crowd. This isn't actually for Sharon. I can lead you into it. I can lead you into it here. To make a 30% reduction by 2030, what resources are there within IFMA itself to help us build our personal knowledge and prepare ourselves to do this within our buildings?
You don't even need to show me that paper. Go get your sustainability facility professional credential.
It is all online, and IFMA Denver is part of that. It starts in April, guys. Let's do this.
Yes. I say I got it the first. That was beautiful. I actually earned my SFP in 2011 when it first came out. I think I was the 4th person in the country to get it. And I'll tell you, that basically led me over the last 10 years to do sustainability for a living. And it's fascinating. And I really credit IFMA for being part of that journey for me. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Carolyn, for adding that. Any other questions?
Electrical capacity to generate all of this without using old natural gas.
We actually do have the electrical capacity on our grid to be able to do that on the larger grid. And Excel is making some improvements and decarbonizing some of the grid to be able to do that. They have their own goals for 2030 that I think it was like 80% decarbonization by 2030. I might be completely off on that. I don't remember the date.
I think that's right.
And then maybe, I think 100% by 2040, 80% by 2030. That doesn't mean you necessarily have capacity on your electrical system in your building or in the particular neighborhood that you're at. But that is something that we're working with Excel to actually look at. And as we do the electrification policies and actually implement them, that we'll be working with them to make sure that either the building that needs to electrify gets the capacity on that particular grid, or we adjust a timeline and make it possible for that person to do it when the grid capacity is available. We want the work to happen, like I said earlier, and we're going to be working with all of the different parties to be able to make sure we have the capacity to do that.
And the grid has a high capacity summer.
Yeah, so Daniel was saying that because of our high summer load, the electrical grid actually has more capacity than we think, because it's not. So even if we do change our space heating and water heating and that kind of thing, that we do have the capacity based on our high summer load. Yeah.
Is there a way for us to know where we stand right now in regards to meeting those?
For, I think it was maybe my 4th slide. I have to go through 45 slides. One more. That one. We actually, our last numbers are 2020. So our baseline that we were using was 2016, which is the furthest dot to the left. And we've been kind of playing with this up and down. 2020, the dip was probably more due to COVID than actual work happening in the buildings. So we haven't updated it for 2021 yet because everybody hasn't turned in their benchmarking data for last year. It's due in June. So we've been kind of playing around the baseline. So getting down to this green line is actually quite an ambitious goal, but this is kind of where we are right now. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for having me today. We'll be around for questions.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time coming in and talking about what is obviously an uncomfortable subject for a lot of people in the room. I mean, let's just be honest about it. I think there's a lot of people that are kind of going, how are we going to do this? So thank you for being the messenger. You're welcome back anytime. And I think we have a small token of our appreciation here for you. Thank you. Okay.
We're good.
Okay, perfect. I'm like, what am I doing here? That's all I've got. I really appreciate everybody taking the time. It's so good to see everybody. Fire away questions at Sharon. Oh, hold on. Carolyn has an announcement. I don't know how I missed that. Please come on up, Carolyn McGarry. Everybody just sit tight for a minute.
I'll try to be super quick. I'm sorry. You skipped me.
Sorry.
I wasn't just going to talk about job opportunities, but I will to remind everybody You got apprentices, you got interns, you got entry-level jobs, you got facility manager jobs, you got facility maintenance jobs. We don't care. We want to hire these students that we're training in this CASR program, CASR funded program, come on, and get them into this career path.
So anytime between now or June, July, August, you have an opening, you're going to talk to Max and I first. Got it? Oh, we'll hunt you down. All right. Don't have any openings right now. Still want to meet some students, talk to them about how cool it is to be in facility management. Got a half day or a full day. Come see me. Want to go on a road trip with me? I'm really fun. Road trip with me. April 7th and April 11th, we're having a facilitathon, which is a facility management entertainment kind of competition for high school and college students. And we are going to show them what it's like. We're going to meet them and talk to them. We're going to get excited about it. Come see me if you want to go do that. April 7th or April 11th. It literally is a road trip with Wonder Woman. It'll be fun. Okay. Need a shorter term type volunteer opportunity? I got one. We are looking for guest speakers, both for either Metro State University for an intro to FM class. I've got an intro to construction project management class. I know we got some construction companies in here. We also have a intro to business. You got your own business. You want to go talk to students about what it's cool and like to own your own business. Come talk to us. We're also looking for guest speakers, or Lisa's looking for guest speakers for the CASR program. So lots of opportunities to speak to students. They're also looking for tours for buildings. You want to show off your building to a bunch of students? Come talk to us. Come talk to me. Don't make me hunt you down. I'd rather you hunt me down. Not sure, still want to help in some way? Join my committee. Any committee members? Any more people helping field some questions, hunting people down for building tours and guest speakers? So ask not what your chapter can do for you, but what you can do for your chapter. All right.
Amen.
All right, kids, I think that's all we've got. Have a fantastic week, and we will see you soon.
I guess I'll just keep this for next time.
Conversation. Everybody wants to ask a question.
Carolyn. Thank you.
That's what you want me to talk about. How long it is getting. Sure, I know with that. So if you're like, and then I'll put together some, how long do you want this presentation? Okay, 20 minutes, you want a little PowerPoint? Okay, just give some people something to look at. Give us a view. Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I do. Good, good. How are you? So yeah, let me know if you need me. You've got my contact, right? Yeah. I haven't changed emails, so you can pick up. All right, there, I did my part.
Really? Good presentation. My friend. Thanks. Always good to see you. Thanks for making it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mandating legislation. The SEC is now involved in regulating ESG reporting. And it's like, that's going to really kind of stuff that is happening all over the country. IFMA just with the Department of Energy launched what they call the Better Climate Challenge through the Resiliency Initiative. And IFMA is an ally. We're signed on listed as an promote. I was just on a video call a week ago. Well, I was one of the windows that was put up on the screen while the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer representing it. And so we're going to be working on promoting that. And one thing they do is the Department of Energy is going to offer all sorts of technical support, technical resources. Anybody that's trying to improve their energy efficiency can get it. Well, you're paying for it with your taxes. It's all available. And so, we're going to start promoting that. One of our corporate, our CSPs, corporate sustaining partners, is actually one of the partners in that DOE program, that's Schneider Electric. So we've got Tim Godley setting up a call with Schneider, so I'm going to talk to them about it. Let's put together a little promotion. What drove you to become a partner in this program? What do you think the benefits? No, Schneider Electric? No. Doesn't Bob Schneider? I don't know. Schneider Electric is international. Yeah. I mean, it's huge international. They have invested in the plan on it. They're part of Clockworks Analytics, which they actually white label under their infrastructure branding, so that product is sold by Schneider. They're in everything. I'm actually going to be moderating a panel discussion with them. Well, I think we'll push it out to April because of stuff going on. Because again, an international audience. So anyway, a lot going on. Why is both sides of the conversation feel that it's all one as it relates to fossil fuel versus electric? I think there are some people that talk. Most people realize there's a transition. Renewable energy, the technologies aren't 100%. You don't have battery storage sufficient to store solar energy in the sunshine. The things like through fossil fuels, gas, oil, that's one of the more harmful ones. Although methane, natural gas, methane doesn't produce as much CO2 in its burn, but the problem is that most of these pipelines leak like a sieve, and methane actually has like 80 times the heat retention properties for CO2. And so although it doesn't last as long in the atmosphere, it has far more heat retention properties. So the more that you need to draw natural gas, the worse it is. Although when you look at it, it produces less CO2. But it's a good bridge fuel if we can basically kind of keep it contained until it's actually burning. But you look at how we're moving towards a more distributed energy generation. So the old grid, which is really based on centralized energy generation, and then transmission across wide distances. That's why everybody, when we're talking about microgrids, the point of a microgrid is that the source of the energy is only transmitted a short distance. There's very little loss. When you transmit it across states, you're producing probably 30%. So that means you have to produce 30% more energy to get it to that endpoint to use it. So it's understanding all of those things and saying, this is how we change some of the technologies to be more effective and efficient. But that's not going to happen. I mean, I've been around this. I've watched technologies transition over decades. I remember when people said, oh, we're going to, in the 1990s, in 5 years, it's all going to be wireless technology. Well, we're doing pretty good in 2022 with 5G. Well, we're doing pretty good now, but that's 25 years later, right? It takes a while for things to become a commodity, and that's really what we're seeing. None of these are the until we actually get a set of renewable energy and storage capacity to be able to hold the energy and use it. The PSA is looking at it. I want to get a picture before you leave. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll take a picture for you. Yeah. Nothing you have to know right now. It's not like I don't think you're thinking well. So you just go to jail. So you're my sweet spot is solving problems.
What do you mean according to this? Do you like my shape?
I like it. We just pause. It sucks, but it's fantastic. I even have to tell you, it's amazing. Informally, they're having to rip out all the atrium stairs that didn't pass code. They poured them at different heights. So, but it looks really really large. It looks really pretty from the outside. Yeah. So they keep hiring us for short buses and long. We don't bump our heads on collapsed mechanical spaces. You can just like, it's a little bit weird. I think once they get it sorted out. I know, it did, yeah, the university in February cleared up that. Fancy.
Hey, had to plug the SMP, man.
I know, we have this and then foundation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Saw the writing on the wall. Yes. All kinds. All kinds, yep. I have a construction class. I have a facility management class, a little bit of everything, facility management, and then a business class. And then essentials of FM, probably more FM. My philosophy is everybody has something fun to say, even if it's like, this is how I got into here, and this is what I had to do to get here, whether or not my lawyer degree help. Actually, I probably oh, you did check that out, so you understand. See? Right now. Now, see, I was convinced, or I was determined, and it's great that I could do it. Facility management.
And then there's very specific. Because it makes all the difference. Yeah, I agree. That'd be awesome. Yeah, look forward to it. Yeah. Thank you guys on that. My son,
If there's 70, that's 35 feet. We have
45 and 20 feet to work on time. Never complains. Well, he does it to do so. But other
Or just in general, I'd love to know like what job fairs and stuff are going on over there, because I'd love to.
They've got,
I need
yeah,
to
they
start
definitely
recruiting.
have. They definitely have some of that
Just
stuff.
have a great
And I'm in the
afternoon.
engineering.
So is she the one you told me about?
I know a guy who knows another guy.
Yeah, you were busy. He was checking your hearing.
Oh, he's a fancy stand part. I like this thing. Hold on. Let's try this thing. Come on. Oh my God. Oh my God. Here it goes.
I'm not the same way. I'm not technologically
I'm
advanced.
like, wait.
Actually, not bad idea.
What do you do?
At least I'd like conferences and events, just put it on your, put it on the table as a QR code. Everybody else can.
Construction.
All right. Okay. And then we probably have
He's gonna volunteer somebody, or like
But you can probably take it.
well, if he knows who's running the downtown campus, just a building.
yes. You know, yeah. My old
No guy knows another guy. No. It's like machine with clubs, same building. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that, I almost stood up. But you did. After hers, I was going to start. If you don't,
I almost went that direction too. How many of you have your SFP? How many of you are going to want your SFP before this
Well,
happens?
think about this. This is the city of Denver. You think that? Her state's doing this too.
The state's doing the same
This isn't
thing.
going to be the only city that does this.
Nope.
It was voluntary for a long time. Now it's become regulated and mandated. It's going to be an interesting implementation and execution.
Yep. Definitely.
It's coming.
Definitely.
That's the whole thing.
You know what generate more power?
Well,
Clean power?
but if you think about it just for a second, they don't have the production capacity that they think they can't
Not
deliver.
really. Not what, I mean, you know how they would increase their production that would be clean? It's nuclear.
Oh, you're talking to the right guy.
Nobody wants, my husband's an electrical engineer.
So for my thesis, we did how to do a nationwide grid. We don't have a nationwide grid.
We don't have the infrastructure for a lot of stuff.
And
I learned
and
things.
micro nukes would be great. In fact, we have a client that's actually looking to build their own. And they're going
Yep.
through.
Everybody's just afraid of it. Just talk to the Ukraine.
My car.
Sure.
You have. Because I was trying to be like my path, like students do the great jobs and everything. And if there's any pilots or like housing, that you guys know that there is this building in Bello that I think should be great for a case study of pilots, they send it my way. We want like online communities to be the ones that see savings and first to electrify. We don't want any unintended consequences. We want to avoid gentrification. We just heard that one Latino arts center left Denver and moved to Lakewood because they were priced out. Right? I don't have more cars, sir, but no. But I think it's a picture.
We would love to take care of it, and a lot of energy officers are talking about.
Yes, in your car.
Yeah, we'll take care of it. Thank you so very much.
I have this nice gas efficient car, but she drives terrible gas. Yeah, me too. So I was driving all over.
Finally got around to this.
I end up filling your gas every week. I'm gonna take a second. All right. I get that old. It's nice. Yeah, that's what I can. I don't have no car payment on, on that one, but I get down to about a half a tank or 26 gallon tank. So 26 gallons, $6 a gallon. Yeah, and I don't let it get down to. I never let it get down. A half a tank is like. So it's what it is. I get that half. I'm like, okay, it's time. But back then, they weren't caring about gas. I mean, I just looked at the highway. I drive 21 miles one way. 21 miles a day. So at least a couple gallons of gas every single day. 5 days a week. So, yeah, if I drive my car, obviously my car, I average 20, 30. Thank you. I'm driving all the time. Yeah. I drive my little car. Nowadays, no, even so, I drive. Well, I won't leave my 10 miles. Right?
So the council every person that has money into
Still hard to imagine. Yeah. I was just talking to my dad. He had to put. He has a. 2012. So he came down, he didn't all that. Are you in that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it used to be where you go, you go. Way less. When I looked down there years ago, kind of more expensive here, but you get a really good deal on the CASR. Not much of a town, you know. Not much of a town.